So how do you want to get into this?
Well, I want to talk to people about the dailies in a way that makes sense and resonates. And it was something you said in last week's podcast that came to mind. And I wrote it down. And
something memorable.
Really. And you said in last week's Q&A podcast, part 2, we don't rise to the highest aspirations of our spiritual life. We fall to the base level of our preparations.
So, man, I did an intervention for a beautiful guy, just a beautiful guy. Very broke, really tragic story. And that was about 9 months ago.
Okay.
I ran into him last weekend. And it was so disappointing. I just yearned for him to be farther along.
Yeah.
Like me and a couple people got him into a really good place. And yet his lifestyle wouldn't sustain it. Right? Like all those patterns and all those habits and those thought patterns, and frankly, friendships that he's still in, circles that he's still hanging out, partly due to his career, but also partly just, because he hasn't changed his way of doing life.
Man, that's disheartening to see.
Oh, it's so aggravating and heartbreaking. And like, you're kidding me, man. So that is what I want to talk about. Welcome back, friends, to the Wild at Heart podcast here in the week of February 10th. Happy February, everybody. And we do want to talk about why our habits, our lifestyles so often undermine our best intentions. But more than that, we want to provide some guidance, some practicals, some hope on that. But before we do, let's take our pause. And we pray, Father, Jesus, Holy Spirit, I give everyone and everything to you now. Help me to do this. Help me to release all that is racing in my mind, in my heart, in my surroundings. I release all people. I release all projects. I give you the future. What do I need to release? What do I need to release? If you need a little more time, hit pause, friends. We are releasing these things in order to get out of the madness and back in touch with our own souls, come back literally into our own bodies, and to find you, to find your love, to find your life, and to find union, and to listen to what you have to say to us this week. So come, meet us here. Amen. So we have a nice offering this week for folks. I think it's very hopeful. I think it's creative and fun to listen to.
Yeah.
We're going to do, we love to share from time to time from our live events because there's a dynamic, there's an energy to it.
It's behind the scenes because although maybe a couple hundred people are at the event, the rest of everyone listening didn't get to experience it, right?
Yeah.
And we gave people a taste of this back last August. We ran 2 podcasts that were 2 of our most popular podcasts in terms of response from Survival School, which was the event we had done.
Yeah.
And that was about orientation and integration.
Yes.
2 of the sessions you led.
Yes.
But today we're going to offer something from survival school, but very different because it's a conversation.
Yeah. This was the last session on Sunday. And so, you've taken, in this case, a group of men, but it could equally have been a group of women, through a spiritual experience, through a lot of great guidance, wisdom, counsel, storytelling. And then at the end, you go, okay, where are we going to land this? How do we make this sustainable?
Yeah.
Because I think about that story, the beautiful intervention with this guy and then seeing him and going, dang, man, 9 months later, you should be farther, you should be better.
Yes.
You were given gold. And the thing is, you can go to the greatest church in the world and be nourished there and mentored there, right?
Right.
You can go to the greatest therapist and have a breakthrough that feels like the breakthrough of a lifetime. But people lose it.
Yeah.
People lose it because their lifestyle, our lifestyle, has been so shaped and baked into us by the world and the culture that we live in that it's just unsustainable. Friends of ours who live in Cairo, you'll get a kick out of this. They're like, you don't understand the idea of pausing in the city of Cairo and in the Arab culture there. They're like, every shop is open all hours. You need to buy a pair of pants. You can buy them at 4 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
There's no stopping. And so they were trying to say, we're trying to translate some of your materials here into our cultural context. the idea of pausing, that's a tough one, right?
Right. And I think we're conditioned in our worlds. We're not only not stopping, but we think in the spiritual life, there are these once in a lifetime highs or once a year. But the dailies is where the action is, right? That's where it really comes into, can we sustain this life over time?
Yeah. I mean, recently I had some pretty beautiful moments with God addressing some things in my soul that felt around grief and loss. And then the next day, it's like, now what do you have for me? Now it's for breakfast. And losing it, just because it's the next thing. So here's what we have for you, everybody. We're going to roll the last session from Survival School. If you're audio and video. So if you want to watch on YouTube, you can. And it's not just me, it's a panel.
Yep. 3 of our other team members.
Yep.
So we've got Alex on it, Conrad, who oversees our discipleship.
Yeah.
And we have Morgan. And the 4 of you, people are going to love it because there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of just practical, okay, but what does it look like for you every Monday morning?
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm asking a series of questions, including not just what do you do to maintain a wholehearted, deep life, thriving in God and in His kingdom. What don't you do? What's no longer part of your life now in order to sustain these things?
That was so intriguing to hear their answers.
Yeah. So you're going to hear the conversation, the questions, the storytelling, and we'll be back at the end.
Okay, so what we want to do in this morning's session, I've asked Conrad and Morgan and Alex to come sit up here with me. So the pressures of the hour, guys, it's thrive or die. Thrive or die. You either adapt your life to thrive, or I just don't know how you're going to do it, okay? So what we're going to talk about is lifestyle. We're going to talk about dailies. We call them dailies. What are your sacred rhythms? What are your do's and don'ts? Because it's not just do's. It's also, I don't do that anymore. How are you adapting the rhythms of your life so that they become habitual to the point at which you are flourishing in the midst of a pretty rough time? And to introduce the thought, I just continue to be amazed when I read the Desert Fathers, when I read about the Desert Fathers. Okay, you guys, there was no internet. There were no cell phones. People didn't have cars, right? There was no Netflix. There were no airplanes. There was no global communication. There was no news broadcasts. And yet, the Desert Fathers fled society and the world because they could feel it destroying their soul. And you're like, holy cow, man. I mean, therefore, I must be living in a really toxic environment. If they needed to leave what we would have considered a pretty agrarian life and kind of awesome, you know? Okay, so I'm just going to interview these guys, and we're going to share from our lives our practices and a little bit of the why and the do's and the don'ts and that kind of thing. But the first question I want to ask you is, when you compare, to, let's say, 5 years ago, is it easier in this current climate to find God and to stay grounded in him? You find it easier to do that or more difficult?
I wouldn't say that I find it easier, but I find it more necessary, is the way I would put it.
Okay.
I think going back to what we did, that podcast with you, me, and JD on desolation.
Yes.
Before we really started to understand the apostasy and all of that as well. But that really took something out of me in that season. And it was hard. It was hard to recover. And it feels like something that's been a continued thing to stay vigilant against.
Yeah.
So I'd say it's harder, but it also feels more necessary as a result.
Yep. Me too.
I would say it's more difficult and more normal. And what I mean by that is the difficulty. Like, I just noticed a practice of reading. I'm a voracious reader. And I used to be able to sit down and read like a chapter of a book without being too distracted. And to get through 1 or 2 pages now without thinking about, I had to check my phone, or I'm going to look up that thing, or I'm going to make a note. There's been a shift because of just the frenetic pace.
Yep.
So that's more difficult. And because of a lifestyle and the practices over time and the consenting to apprenticeship, I'm no longer okay with reading a book and being distracted. So it's changing it for something like, I will not have my phone with me when I'm reading a book.
Yes.
Because I don't have the discipline and the maturity to not check it. And so I literally take it out of the room, or I will power it down as a way of an antidote for the increasing difficulty.
Okay, fascinating piece of data, research. Students score an entire grade lower on exams if their phone is in their backpack. If it's in the room, the capacity of distraction, isn't that amazing? You can't have it sitting there on the desk.
You feel it.
Yeah, right.
And the act of turning it
off,
that's a real thing. Something, that shifts.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
Yeah, I think for me, I hear that question, and the first thing that comes to my heart is I just don't have an option.
Yes.
And for 5 years ago to now, it felt like 5 years ago. I didn't have an option then, but it kind of felt like I could fit it in here. And now I'm in this season of like learning, whoa, I have to be okay with God rearranging everything, including how much I think I can get done for you, like everything, how much I can spend time with my kids, all that.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's beautiful. I'm just naming that's one piece. But there's also family and even like activities with our girls. The whole thing, it's like, whoa, I had a vision, and I have to be okay with God painting an entirely different picture.
Okay.
That feels fresh.
Right. This will be really helpful for the guys as well. Really quick, stage of life, kids in the house or out of the house?
Both. Mm-hmm. So 21-year-old, 19-year-old, 15-year-old.
Okay.
So daughter's off in college, son is in a career, living at home, but in a career and kind of on his own in that regard. And just my 15-year-old that's with us. Yeah.
More stage of life.
Yeah, loads of transition. Right now, 16-year-old, 19-year-olds. So they got their licenses. My house is inundated with teenagers. And the schedule is on a high school kid's schedule. And Joshua launched, he's halfway through an initiation year. So my first time of having this sort of empty nester margin in moments. And so I'm sort of in between little ones and empty nest.
Just please describe the life of parents of sporting children, the athletics life.
And the hard part in answering that is we did everything in our power to not give way to the system of the organized sports, the club, blah, 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 lacrosse and football. And God planted us in a place. His idea, we said yes. If not, I would live in a cabin.
Yes.
And off the grid, heating my own home.
Yeah.
And so...
How many volleyball games did you watch last weekend? Live high school girls volleyball games that you were there cheering for?
In Abigail, Denver Coliseum for high school varsity volleyball, 23 games. And they only made it to the quarterfinals. 23.
So I just
right? That's one kid, one sport, one weekend.
Right.
Yeah.
Just trying to paint a little reality here.
Yeah.
It's not like we just live this spacious life, and therefore we can do these things we're about to describe.
Right.
Up until quite recently, your athletics life was...
travel lacrosse, volleyball, football, right? And then even like the club scene of like Easter Sunday, there's a tournament. Like, right? I mean, it's diabolical.
Yeah.
And yet, it's a walk with God.
Yes.
It's so...
And Morgan was making nachos in the snack bar. Okay. Stage of life.
So getting ready to celebrate on my 10th year of marriage with Samantha in January. So still pretty young marriage, and then young kids, 7-year-old, 5-year-old girls, 3.5-year-old little wild man. And it's crazy.
Yeah.
And even, we do have some, I was sharing with Alan on the walk down, like even when we do get them to bed, like on time, it's like 7:45, 8. By the time you get to the end of your day, like you don't want to do anything, right?
Nothing.
So again, just to name, it's fought for.
Yeah. Realities.
Conrad stopped by my house last week. I was in the garage in a moment working on chainsaw, and I just hear noise before I see people, and I hear screaming, 2 girls, and then this little barbarian in a hula. In Avatar, second Avatar, that little guy with the face mask, that's his son, Braddock. He runs into my garage. He starts swinging at stuff. In 30 seconds, he smacked his sister in the face. She has bloody nose by accident. Runs and rolls on the garage floor, runs onto the couch, and I didn't even get to see Conrad yet. It's like, I don't remember that. And it was a moment ago. A moment.
Yep. Okay. All right. Okay. So what we want to talk through on just the most practical possible level, as you are reflecting on how am I adapting my life, my rhythms, my pace, the things I do and the things I don't do in order to thrive in an hour like this one. Okay? Like, what are your dailies? What's your habits? What are your sacred rhythms? What do you do? Okay, really hope you have some. So, for example, morning. What does morning look like?
Yeah, my morning is actually, it's fairly simple, I guess I would say. When I wake up, and one of the things I actually started doing a couple of years ago is I don't use an alarm now. And part of that's just intentional of I want God to give me the rest I need, not try to arrange for it artificially. And so if I sleep past a certain point, I accept that that's what my body needs, and that's good. So first thing when I wake up, actually the immediate thing I do is spending time with Jesus. And a lot of the time it really just looks like, I love you, Jesus. I love you, Jesus. It's that. And just sitting there receiving him and giving him myself. I give you me, I receive you. And that is my initial time of prayer. After some time in that, then I'll go through kind of a daily prayer of taking my place in the cross, the resurrection, the ascension, through somewhat of, if you've read the daily prayer, it's kind of that, but it's on my own and it's off my head and my heart and where God's taking me in those things. Currently, and just coming into this season, a few weeks ago, I actually went back to the 30 Days to Resilient. And so I've added that in. That's not a regular practice normally, but it is right now. And so going through the 10 minutes with that, once that's done, then a practice that's become very important to me is I've jumped back into the scriptures. And so, but I keep it really simple. It's one chapter. I don't read more. I don't read less. I just do one chapter, and something about that for me is helpful. Mm-hmm. And I just linger with that chapter and notice what's coming out. And recently, the significant part of that for me has been, and I've been in the letters lately. So Paul's letters, kind of Thessalonians through Hebrews in that area in the last couple months. And what I've been seeing is just all these passages jumping out of the centrality of Jesus Christ, and that he is really the only thing we need is Jesus. And if you have that, you have everything else. And so that's been soaking into my soul as I've been going into the scriptures. And that was a hard one for me. I didn't have a regular practice of scripture. And so to some extent, I think I was paralyzed by, I see guys who are really good studiers around me who, they dive deep into things and meaning behind it. And, I should really have a concordance and do all this stuff. And I don't do that, and I can't do that. And I don't need to do that. Right. I need time with God to let him reveal himself to me. And that's the way I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Currently.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah.
Great. What's your morning look like?
Yeah. I think, to respond to that, I have to back up just a bit, because if you had asked me that about every 6 months in the last several years, it changes because there are a lot of circumstances out of my control. For example, I very much enjoy the mornings. I'm an early riser, and the evenings, I shut down. And in the last couple of years, the mornings are when I get my kids. And so there's a trade-off there. I don't get to choose, much like young children, right? And so I think it's important to name. Yep. It's a practice. It's changing all the time. Yeah. Carpooling, making lunches, gauging for those sports. So I'm constantly attuning to what is it that I can do now. And one other piece of qualifier that really helps me is, like Dallas Willard said, there are no ordinary days. That's so compassionate to me. And so what is it that I can do on every day? That's where I have to start. And the one thing I can do every day, and this has been cultivated over time, and what it means to me is when I wake up, I wake up into a chaotic world that most of me does not believe in God. In that moment, I wake up. And so I have to start there. And I begin my day with God. Like in my spirit, laying in bed before I take a leak, God, the first night, it starts with God, Proverbs 1. And then I simply pray, God, I receive you as I invite you to father me. I invite you to mother me. I invite you to brother me. Every morning, every day, I can do that. And it's this short process of that mutual indwelling, more of me in this moment coming into God and more of God coming into me. And so now I step out of my bed, and whatever I face, at least I have come home to the Trinity, and I'm living from that place rather than the frenetic reaction to whatever it is. Yeah. That's a different season. Yeah. So that would be, I think, would be most helpful.
Yeah. To say. Yeah. Me too. First thing out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Jesus. 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 Just before I get out of bed.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus. Jesus.
Changes things.
Yep. Morning?
Yeah.
With young kids?
Well, it's really easy. I'm kidding. It's not easy. It's complicated. It's complex. I think where I go is I go back to having a 2.5-year-old daughter and a newborn baby girl. So CNN, Crimson, back to back, basically. Samantha recovering from 2 brutal C-sections, which means like she can't even hold a jug of milk. So like literally she can hold our kids, but like they needed my physicality to pick them up and give them to her. So she could,
Yeah.
And so what started in that season for me, and that was just the home demands, right? So full-time job, head football coach and a teacher, like I didn't have another minute. And yet I find myself dipping into podcasts and hearing you guys talk about spiritual formation. What's your soul care? And I'm like, I'm pissed.
Yeah.
Like, John Morg, like I don't have another minute.
Yep.
Yeah.
So finally felt in that crucible of kind of chaos and circumstances that were beyond my control. I felt invited to bring that anger to Jesus. Like, Jesus, I'm mad here. Don't you see me? Like, and he was so beautiful. It was almost like a good coach moment where he's just like, yeah, I see ya, buddy. And also kind of quit whining because I'm not asking for a minute. I'm asking for a meal. And that began this thing of I unintentionally, so this is like God was orchestrating this. It starts with God. I wasn't setting out to do this with like resolve and like I unintentionally in that season get out the door with a cup of coffee, no breakfast. I was skipping breakfast.
Yeah.
And what I felt, and over time, what Jesus has shown me is like, I want to be your breakfast. And so now it's crazy. Like I don't set an alarm because I try to get as much sleep as I can because that's good for my body. And I mostly wake up when the kids wake up and it's bananas. But at some point in my morning before 10 a.m., I make it a practice to sit down even for 30 seconds with my coffee.
Yeah.
And just say, Jesus, you're my breakfast. And that's it. And now in time and overtime, the scripture of like, Jesus is the bread of life and he's the living water.
Yes.
I don't even know. It's really serious, but it's the words becoming flesh in me.
Yeah.
It's impacting me. And that's again, something that God was up to behind the scenes. So it's super hopeful.
Yeah. Beautiful. That's beautiful. Very different stage of life. Empty nest, Stacy and me, and therefore our home is like a monastery. So the things I'm going to describe from my life, you just have to put in that context, right?
Yeah.
And you have to put into 45 years of getting there.
So good.
Okay.
So good.
Okay. Can I preface that?
Yeah.
Because what I'm about to share with you could feel a little daunting, but you also need to know what's the reality. Like I really appreciated my friend Bohush Zivkop from Slovakia. It's a wild story, but he shows up at my house and I hardly knew him. And he says, I want to stay in your home. And I'm sorry, I'm so American. I am so American. I'm like, what the, and he says, I need to see if it is real. Good for him, right? So he got to come in and here's what he saw. So it's Jesus, Jesus, Jesus before I get out of bed. I get out of bed. I do not check my phone. I make a cup of tea. I go to the window and I do several things in a rhythm. I put headphones on and I listen to a worship song. Then I listen to audio Bible passage, usually a chapter. And then I start my daily prayer. And my daily prayer is memorized. It's part of me. It's in me. It's 45 minutes long. And I adore it. It is joy. It is life. But I'm also cleaning house, man. I'm blowing stuff up and shutting things down and bringing the kingdom and the joy and the life and boom, 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 that kind of thing. And then I start my day. And it's been about an hour and 15 minutes with God. Then I'll sit down and study. And, so it's just a very different stage of life, but it's good for you to hear that and go, okay, well, there's something to aspire to. Okay. So I'm going to put a slide up. Okay. So as you think about sacred rhythms, practices of life, dailies, your habits, they kind of fall into 4 different categories. The category of soul care, the category of intimacy and communion, the category of sacred nourishment, and the category of being an amphibian. And here's why I differentiate this. Because, second slide, for example, nature, getting out in nature is soul care. And when I hear people say, oh, yeah, I have dailies, I have my sacred rhythms, I go for a run every morning. And I'm like, that is awesome. That is so good for your body, and that is so good for your soul to get out and move and do that. You understand that soul care, but that doesn't do the same thing for you that prayer does. Okay? That's important. Like, there's different things, and there's study, but study does not do for you what Alex is doing with Jesus, I love you, Jesus, I love you, Jesus, I love you. That's a whole different thing than study, right? Because it's just this communion. It's just intimacy, right? And what we want to do, this isn't like a quiz or an exam where you're busted. It is that you want to build a fuller life in God. You want to build a fuller set of practices. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys in these categories. Now, what I mean by amphibian, I'm going to describe a little bit more of that kind of towards the end, but the prayer of descent that you'll find on the Pause app, you'll find it in Resilient, that it is learning to experience the kingdom of God, the actual experiences of the kingdom of God, which is very, very different than going for a run. Okay? So the amphibious life is something that we mature and we grow into. The POD is the prayer of descent. So, okay, how about in the category of intimacy and communion with God, I would put things like worship and prayer, right? And it's just Jesus, 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 and it's Father, Father me, and it is you are my breakfast, right? Yeah, that's the intimacy stuff. Say a little bit more about that. What else do you do that would fit into a category of just intimacy, cultivating intimacy?
One of the things I've started trying to do, and I'm not always successful at it. Sometimes I turn the radio on the car, but I'm trying to be more intentional of not turning it on, and spending some time silent, and just allowing. One, it allows me to recognize where my thoughts are going.
Yes.
And then spend some time releasing that to God.
Yes.
But it also allows me the opportunity to have some intimacy with God, to allow him to speak in the quiet and in the moment. I do keep, I use Spotify, and I have probably 5 different worship sets within there that I've cultivated over time that have different meaning to me. Exactly. So I've got one that, if I'm feeling anxious, it's the one I go to, and I labeled it safe, right? It's safe. And it deeply ministers to something in me. And so I will, that also will be sometimes instead of silence, I'll do that. To get it. Some of the intimacy.
I love the practicality of that. I have several Spotify lists that I go to help me worship and find God and center myself in him. Yeah, super helpful.
Yeah.
What do you guys do for intimacy?
Go? Yeah, I'll go. So prayer is another big one. And I found myself, just the Pause app and the 30 Days to Resilient, just cycling through that. But what's beautiful to name is I shared kind of the Jesus is my breakfast thing. That's kind of the bare minimum.
Yeah.
But if it is a day where I can find myself up early, hitting the play button on Pause is really helpful. And my little barbarian finds himself breaking out of his room and interrupting that.
Yes.
And so just to name, like, sometimes it's really good. And then other times God wakes Braddock's spirit up and he just wants to hug me through Braddock interrupting. And so for years I was like pissed at my kids.
Yeah.
And then God began to reframe like, no, I'm actually just so delighted that you're even like here, son, that I actually woke them up so that they could hug you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So that, yeah,
sweet.
being open to what God's bringing, whether it's what you want or not.
Yep.
Yeah. For intimacy, for me, I think one of the things I've learned at 47 is in this sort of frenetic, more up into the right world, the practice of abstinence, the taking away of something is a door that opens up intimacy really more quickly and more substantively. You know, in Becoming a King, I kind of dive into 3 categories of this. So there's practices of engagement, practices of abstinence, and practices of my weird. And those are 3 buckets. And so as an example for intimacy, this summer in a, prayer of descent, deep place, Jesus said, I'm inviting you to choose a season of healing. And I was like, far out, I receive it. And what I didn't know is what that would cost me. And one example is he invited me to give up alcohol, which I've been now 2 months. So I haven't had any alcohol, and I haven't done that since I'm like 16, I think. It's like my last time going that long. And what it's opened up is to take that comforter away. I mean, that's my daily. Pop some relief that's guaranteed that I can control. And I've taken that away, but you can't fill something with nothing. And so I find this curiosity in the abstinence of what will nourish me in that intimate place. Yeah. And so all of a sudden it's like the access to the kingdom in my daily life is right there because I see how I use it as a reaching. So it's things like I added a candle in some of my times with God. I never used a candle before, and I'll just hold it and I'll look at the flame and I'll feel the warmth and I'll be like captivated by the supernatural reality that is this flame. And I literally feel God feeding me, nourishing me. Then scriptures, out of my sort of study learner type person, I think about God and I learn about God and I do less contemplating God, and we become what we behold, Peterson said. And so not having alcohol has caused me to sit in the Psalms, for example, in a way I never have before. And I do a Psalm per day with the BGS New Testament group. Lots of you are in. But like, I've never just sat in the Psalms. And so like a couple weeks ago, it was like Psalm 40, and the verse says, I waited and waited and waited on God. I never got past that. Yeah. Whereas before I'd be like my Psalm and my New Testament reading and 3 questions and then carpool. And then I waited and I waited and God revealed all the places in me that are waiting. And it was intimacy. So that abstinence is really important for me. At every time there's something I'm abstaining from.
Yes. Yeah, that's really beautiful. In order to find intimacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not a self-hatred right. or punishment.
So it's not sustainable if it is.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Okay. I'm actually going to ask you guys some questions about what you don't do. How much news do you take in each day?
I'll fire from the hip. I hate technology. I'm not on social media. I do not read any news because I can't.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that I read about the news that helped me about a year ago that men often find relief in parts of the news because there's chaos and bad things happening that they don't have to do anything about. Oh, wow. Isn't that interesting? They did a study. So it opens the door to all kinds of stuff, but there's also, have you ever felt that feeling of like, oh, I can't do anything about that. And so it's just really interesting where to that question, I feel, John, like a responsibility to be informed as a steward, right? There is that pull of like, I've got allies around the world. I've got kids. And so I feel responsibility. And I also am aware I use it and I turn to it in ways that are actually unhelpful. So I think the best way I could respond to it is I have to be attuned to when and why am I doing this? And so again, it changes. There are seasons where I say, I just have to fast from it, and it's okay. What happens in the world, whether I know or not, it's not my responsibility. And so then when I come back to it, and to go, Jesus, what do I need to know? And so, for example, like NPR has a 5-minute national news, and it's helpful because it's audio. There's no distractions. When it's over, it's over. The next thing doesn't play, like YouTube and everything else. So when I do go to the news, that helps me because it has boundaries. So I have to really tune into the why behind it. What's the purpose?
I can definitely get sucked in to the news. I don't know. I would say lots of evenings I will turn on kind of the world news and watch that to find out what's happening in the world. And there are times where what's happening in the world overwhelms me, and I realize I do need to turn it off. The one thing I have completely disengaged from is Facebook. And so I blew that up, created an account with no friends, because I still have to engage with Wild at Heart since we have it. So I'm an admin to be able to handle Wild at Heart, and I'm not telling you what my name is. Actually, I don't know that you could find it because I did all the settings that said, you can't, but that way I don't have a feed. Like I can't go find anything. I don't see people talking about stuff. And that's been really helpful. It's one I kind of struggle with because I want to be aware of what's going on. And I'm, when my friends are talking about things happening, I kind of want to understand what is happening. I haven't figured that one out very well.
That's good. 5 minutes max for me, just the headlines. And not every day. And I just resist staying in it. I resist staying in it. I don't have a social media accounts of any kind, so I'm not on any of that stuff at all, period. I just don't I don't live that life. I spend very, very little time on my phone.
Can I touch on that just a second? Part of my thing without social media is there was a time in my story when I was on it, and I was in a highly competitive environment as a football coach. And I started noticing how the competitive atmosphere of football and social media actually was harming my soul and my capacity to love specifically other men. And so I had to it was a process. It wasn't just like, I don't do that, but I just am naming that as a possible category for you guys. It gets in there. There's really something.
It's good.
I think the enemy is doing something pretty harmful there.
Oh, well, all the data shows it. Anxiety, resentment, jealousy, and depression all rise in direct correlation to the amount of time you spend on social media. I mean, that's a fact. There's all tons of research on that. So, because the thing is, we're talking about practices, but we're also talking about lifestyle, right? It is a way of life. So, do you stay up super late at night? Are you up at 11 p.m.?
No. Mel and I are usually in bed around 9:30.
I think what's so helpful about that, John, with the stages, like if I had full control, I'd be in bed at 8:30. And yet I have a 16-year-old daughter out there that actually requires me not only to be up in the evening, but to sleep with my phone in my room. Because I'm responsible. I would never choose that. But I have to make shifts accordingly because of that season. So I think one of the things that's super helpful to me in this category is at this stage of my initiation, the way I think about it is I organize my life around being an apprentice in God's kingdom, period. Not around my fitness, not around my work, not around my family, not around my finances. Now, please understand, I do those things. right? I work out 6 days a week, but I don't think, where am I going to get a workout? I'm thinking I am organizing my life around apprenticeship. So I stay up very late because of my teenagers.
Yes.
And therefore, I have to rest in different intervals in the day.
Yes.
I was never a napper.
Yes.
I try when it's in my power, as many days as possible, to take a nap.
Yes.
It feels actually so wimpy. It's just interesting. That's what I feel when I say that. And yet, if I'm going to stay up at 11 and I'm not going to use alcohol to make that possible, which is what I often did, I have to find other ways to nourish. And it's just huge. So when I'm getting a workout, it's not to get a workout. It's I'm organizing my life as an apprentice. And so I'm going to do something less convenient, less efficient, like taking the run in a beautiful place rather than being indoors, because my life is organized around that. And therefore I can make sense of all other things that are important.
That
makes sense.
Absolutely. Talk radio?
No.
Nope. I mean, it's just important to name these things. Do you use Red Bull or Monster to keep you going in the day?
No. I do drink coffee.
All day long?
No. Like probably 2 cups a day.
Okay.
Yeah. Coffee.
Yeah.
Caffeine can be a slippery one. For me.
Oh, so, yeah. It's a slippery one.
I used to use caffeine so much and was deeply entrenched in that. And now it's just when necessary, like driving, like on a, I'm going hunting or a long road trip or stay up late, coming home from the airport. When necessary, I do. And on the average day, like this morning, I had decaf. But that, again, that wasn't like, that was over, like you said, 45. That was over time. That was one of the last transitions for me.
Do you fit into your weekend as much as you possibly can?
I'll go. So Samantha has a beautiful heart, and it's a humongous heart, and she loves to connect with people. And so it's weekend time. Let's get the kids and some stuff. And I like that too, with some boundaries. So right now it's unfinished. It's me and Samantha walking that out of like, hey, okay, cool. If you feel like you need this for your heart, Samantha, I love that. And I bless that. I won't be there. I'm going to go on. Seriously, if I'm going to go on a run. Now that's not every Saturday in soccer. It's maybe out of 5 soccer games, I'm at 4 of them. And then one of them, I'm practicing, I'm risking that I actually matter and that my heart actually matters. So that's where I'm at. It's very unfinished.
I mean, because just these simple like barometers of how much you use caffeine to keep you going, how much time you're on news and talk radio, how late you go to bed, how hard you push yourself. Like if someone came as a disciple of your life and lived the way you live for a week, what would be the fruit of that?
How does it? Wow.
It's just a really good, it's a really good question, right?
Yeah.
I was winging it. If someone came and lived with you as your disciple for a week, what would be the effect on them of adopting your way of life? Right?
I think you're literally asking us to ask that question.
Yes, I am.
God,
yes,
good.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Great question.
Yeah,
I notice even like that weekend question, John. We used to pack so many other good things, right? And you could justify one at a time. They all made sense.
Yes,
cumulatively, the fruit was like Sherry and I just constantly battling the calendar.
Yes,
and now the subtle but very pragmatic shifts of Saturday night is date night. It's joy dates. And so every other week, one of us picks. And whatever the other person chooses, the other person says, yes, I will do that. And the only qualifiers are no big conversations, good ones or bad ones, because we're big idea people. We don't do that. We only have fun.
Right on.
And Sundays used to be like a lot of community activity and just more frenzy. And now Sunday night is joy night, dates with family, and we rotate who has it. And it doesn't happen every week, but our kids know Sunday's protected for margin. So all that chaos of sports, when they're not Sundays, which is now most of the time, it comes to a close and the kids get sleep and they get time for homework. And we get time to be together just for joy. So it does shift. 2 degree shifts make a massive difference over time.
They do. Stace and I had to finally put a sign on the calendar and on the refrigerator, and it was her quote, "Everything is possible in 3 months." So 3 months out, we were just booking everything like, yes, sure, we'll come over and do that thing. But when you get to the day, you realize, why did we say yes to this? Right? Because everything's possible when it's 3 months away. Right? And you're not calculating your week into it, what your day was like. And so, like throttling everything back, creating margin. So here we are. A couple more questions. So let's take the soul care category, which is different than study and it's different than worship, right? It is things you do for the solace and nourishment of your soul, your soul's well-being. What are you doing for soul care? One thing these days. What works?
One of the most helpful is getting out into nature. And a lot of the time right now, I did have a practice of running every day, and that was awesome. And my body didn't hold up under it. And so I don't do that anymore. And now most days, most weeks, it's out walking the dog. We've got a great neighborhood and we've got some great trails that kind of go off into lonely places. And so I'll take the dog and take her off the leash, let her run and just enjoy being out. When I can, it's also getting on my bike. Like that's pretty soul filling for me.
Great.
Just putting miles pedaling. And it is that thing that allows my mind to settle down. To just not have the frenetic going on.
Beautiful.
I mentioned this summer in a deep place, God said it's a season of healing. So I think to respond to that, it's seasonal. And what's interesting, the first thing that comes up for me is I'm choosing to be in physical therapy for some chronic injuries. And you would think, first of all, does that sound like soul care? And secondly, if something's broken, fix it. Not when you're not good at receiving love. I'll take care of everyone else but me. The courage it takes to book it, to pay for it, to go to it and receive care. Especially my body. Especially from a woman. It is holy and every time uncomfortable. I mean, it feels like going to some combination from confession, to this, a mentor, a sage, and she's re-educating me on how to heal and take care of my body at 47. And so I come out of those sessions just so wobbly because of the parts of me that still are unpracticed in receiving love. So it's huge.
Beautiful.
So soul care, there's like kind of like the daily and then a really important one bi-weekly. So daily, some type of movement outside. Sometimes it's only 10 minutes, sometimes it's longer. And for me, the bi-weekly one is similar to you of receiving care and just practicing, rolling the dice that not only my heart matters, but my story does, and just sitting face to face with a counselor and sitting in my tears and sitting in my story. And right now it's every week you get to it and you're like, I don't want to go. And then you get out of it and you go, wow, I'm so glad. And so, that
beautiful.
seems, I don't know if that's that category or not.
It is. You bet. It's taking care of your soul. I'm thinking I do a jillion things for soul care, but here's a really practical one. I walk away on a regular basis. So if I've been at the computer for a while, I walk away. If I've been on the phone for a while, I walk away. If I've been in meetings for a while, I walk away. And what does walk away mean? I don't know. I go check the ball of the dogs. I at the building, and I go out and walk around the outpost and just take laps outside. I just sit and do nothing. Creating a cadence to my day so that it's not get up, have your time with God,
Right.
live like a pagan, say your bedtime prayer, right?
Wow.
Like, that's madness. It's not sustainable, not in the long run. So I walk away. There's a cadence, there's a rhythm, there's a kindness. And I go home almost every day at lunch, because I can, and I take a nap.
Mm-hmm.
And my body will take a 20-minute nap. It's perfect. It's reviving, because my nights are colorful. I have a lot of visitors. In the spiritual sense. They're going, really? What?
Tell us more, John.
It just comes with, doing what we do. There are certain occupational hazards that come with this. And so I need rest. You've got teenagers. I've got high-ranking foul spirits. And so I nap. But you see what we're describing is a way of life that if someone came and lived in your life as your disciple for a week, the effect on them would be several things. They would find God. They would experience God. They would find deep integration and inner healing just by being in your rhythms for a week. Mm-hmm. They would laugh a lot. They would have a lot of joy. And they would find their body coming down off of what they didn't realize was, I live cranked as a way of life. I live on adrenaline and cortisol. That's how, and they would find their body coming down from that into something sustainable, right?
It's good.
Wouldn't that be good? Yeah, that'd be killer. Okay, so there are various categories, and some of you are great at study, but you're actually not experiencing a lot of intimacy. And so I would say, well, then pick up something that gets you intimacy, worship or silence and solitude or, whatever it is you need for intimacy, right? Some of you are great at soul care. You've got some really good soul care practices, but you don't experience the kingdom of God. Like the river of life is a real thing. You can go to it. You can jump in it. You can swim around in it. It's very healing. You can invoke it into your body. You can invoke it into your home. It's like there are these resources that are available in the kingdom that the fascinating thing about the amphibious life is this. If you take a true amphibian, a frog, and you only put it in water, it dies. If you put it only in a terrarium where it doesn't have water to get into, it dies. It needs both worlds. You are an amphibian. You need both worlds. You need a lifestyle in which you are experiencing the provision of the kingdom of God in both worlds.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
So practical, you're in Whole Foods, right?
Yep.
How do you do it? Like, in other words, how do you manage being...
which part?
Being amphibious.
Yes.
In that sort of space,
yes.
By way of example. It's a Wednesday.
Yep.
Between meetings and you're grabbing some stuff and you are in the kingdom of God and you're also in Whole Foods. Like, explain what that looks like.
The first question is, am I supposed to be here, Lord? Right? I don't just blast through my day making unpartnership decisions. Right? There's a friendship. There's a kind of thing. And so I'll choose the less busy times, the less chaotic times. But here's a fun thing I do as an amphibian is as I'm cruising through Whole Foods, I am praying for the unveiling of people's hearts to the revelation of Jesus. And I'll just be pushing my car along and Jesus will say, that guy there. And he'll say, that girl over there. And I just have so much fun. They have no idea I'm praying for them, right? But I'm a friend of God, and I'm like, I pray that guy encounters Jesus Christ today. I pray for the unveiling of her. She looks depressed. So I fry the depression that's over her spirit, and I pray for the revelation of Jesus to her heart. So that's part of how I be an amphibian in Whole Foods. It's a ball, man. It's so fun.
That's one way to go get potato chips, huh?
I just go pick up the potato chips.
And there's a place for that too.
And there's a place for that too.
There's a place for that too.
Pick up the potato chips.
Maybe not potato chips. You should get some broccoli.
Huh?
Just broccoli instead of potato chips.
Okay.
My wife keeps telling me that too.
I want to do a sacramental practice that for Stacy and I. So if you come into our evenings, our time's almost up and we could go for hours on this. If you come into our evenings, there's a point in the evening where all technology gets turned off. Okay? And that in our home, we turn towards the end of the day, whatever that is, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., wherever we are, we turn to some worship and prayer, and we take communion. Okay, as a sacramental practice, as a sacramental way of living, and partly, frankly, just because we have to. We just have to. We have to do those things to find God in this hour, shut the warfare down. It's like not optional, right? Mm-hmm. It sounds like, whoa, really mystical and stuff. It's just survival, really. But it's lovely. It's beautiful. But for right now, we're just going to take a moment and go, wow, that was a lot to take in. Set it down, okay?
Okay, so if you were watching on YouTube, the last thing you saw in that session was a slide. But I need to tell our audio listeners what it said because it's so killer. So after the conversation, so beautiful, so helpful, just so enjoyable.
Yes.
We put a slide up. It was a question. It's a one-line question. And here's what it said. If someone came and lived with you for a week, what would be the effect on them from adapting or adopting your way of life?
That's a revealing question, man.
Oh my gosh, you just think, oh, wow, what would that be like, everybody? If somebody came, and let's just say they spent 3 days with you and did what you do, followed you through your entire rhythms.
Yes.
What would be the effect on their soul? How would they come out of that experience? Right? Would they be more nourished? Would they be more wholehearted? Would they be in a rich communion with God? It's just like a litmus test. It's just a good bottom line question. So wanted our audio listeners to hear that. And as we exit the video here in YouTube, we always have some visual up. We're going to put that question back up for people to linger with. Okay, so that was Survival School. Next week, we're going to talk about some of our other beautiful resources and how they're shaping people's lives around the world and how to get into this, how to watch Survival School and how to partake of these things.
Yeah.
Right?
And what you just saw, that one session of Survival School that we showed, you can go through that as a man. You can find out more on our website. You can lead a group. You can take a group through it, or you can just attend one. You can find out more on our Wild at Heart website, and we'll put that address on the screen, but it's wildatheart.org. And then once you're on
/events, it's on our events page.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. All right. See you. Leave this in. All right, everybody. See you next week.